Well, welcome again to these two gentlemen who historians and two men. Well, it's been a while. First of all, I guess since we've been back and had a new recording done, so I'm excited. We have it's going to be interesting topic, but we have obviously we have Teiowí, Tommy Deer, who is artist, historian, librarian, you know, here at the Cultural Center, and my father, who is he's a guy. He's the guy. He's our wise gentleman who we have here.
My social studies teacher.
Social studies teacher. No, but you know a lot of stuff too, and it's always.
I find our history being very interesting.
Yeah, and I've also.
That's what it comes down to.
Being my father, I mean, we've always had we always have deep conversations about things, and even yourself, Teiowí, I remember being, back and having those conversations way back when I was in Rotinonhsión. That's a long time ago. But not to get off track there, but so this one we're going to be talking about particularly the history of the Longhouse in Kahnawake, right?
That's kind of where it ends.
Mm-hmm, okay.
But it kind of begins a little bit earlier.
Okay.
A little bit, probably a lot earlier.
Right.
And the running title so far, I'm calling my research is the fall and rebirth of Rotinonhsión governance at Kahnawake.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's
a little more detailed than my yeah. My title was a little blanket term history.
It's an interesting title.
No, that is a good
opens up to a lot of ways you can go with
so I guess if you want, we can I'll give it to you if you want to say the
I'll share my standard disclaimer. We've done this now a few times, and I always like to start with just some words about knowledge acquisition. I guess what we're going to be discussing today is information that we've probably learned up until this point in our lives, and it's by no means exhaustive or ignorant of any other information that we're not aware of yet.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always say, I look at cultural knowledge as like a jigsaw puzzle, and there's a lot of different puzzle pieces that we need to acquire from the written record, from oral tradition, and even from experience. And we use a very critical thinking methodology to figure out how all those pieces fit together so we get a proper impression of what we're looking at. So I think that's what we're doing here, and I guess I'm going to share some research that I've been working on, chipping away at for a few years, and
But I guess
and it's a work in progress.
Yeah, and also that it's all just like you said, it's all puzzle pieces. But again, it's this is just the knowledge that how you've gained it, and you were just kind of relaying what you've researched over the years.
I'll say that I've been chipping away at this timeline for a few years, and in the hopes that maybe it lays down a path for other students of our history to be able to follow and maybe expand on in the future.
Right.
So maybe once I feel that it's gone far enough, we'll probably publish it here at the Cultural Center as a historical bulletin, like we have with other projects. And maybe that'll be soon.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I guess go on.
I'm really excited to hear some of. Again, I don't want to jump ahead, but I've been reading off and on different research books in the form of books and sometimes in theses or that people have from time to time in bits and pieces, going through it and I there's so much that's out, a lot that's out there, and of course the knowledge from our own people.
Yeah.
But trying to piece them in, and really, when you say it's a puzzle, boy, it really is a complex, because you hear a bit here, you hear a bit there, you read a bit here, and you go, and it's just very interesting for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, from myself too, I guess, speaking as the youth at this. You know, like I thought about this earlier. I was thinking about me being, you know, I guess a lot of the histories, like especially, it's hard to retain a lot of it, you know, and so there are things that I wish I knew that I don't know. That you know, I guess it just comes with time.
Yeah.
And it's a complex history, and it can be I guess it could be a little bit like you know, can go touch on certain things that we might, you know, maybe I'll have a question or something that might be a little bit
Yeah. You
out
guys
there,
feel free
but
to stop me as I'm going to.
yeah.
For sure.
All right. Well, if you want to kick it off,
Okay.
where do you want to start? Where does, I guess that my question that I said
It's
before,
always
where does it begin?
It's always the hardest thing to do,
to
to
the
talk
big-
about history, because you got to qualify what you're talking about by going back a little bit further.
Yeah.
So I'm really going to look at when we first established the communities along the St. Lawrence, starting in 1667 and right up until we settled in this location in 1716. I'm not really going to go into a real thorough history of how we got here. Maybe I think we covered that in the last podcast.
Yeah, we probably did.
Check out that previous show. But when we got here, we weren't the only Ungwehunga people who were living in this settlement.
1667.
1667, yeah. So 1667, when we were at Gundage, at La Prairie, actually the first people that came settle there were Oneidas. That went to that settlement, and then of course once we start hearing about that in the Mohawk Valley, it didn't take us too long to start coming up here as well. There was Onondagas, and then there was also some non-Rotinonhsión people who were living here, probably Hurons, Abenakis, and others that maybe had embraced the Christian faith. But I don't want to paint our original communities as being Christian communities as it's often described in history books, because I think there was a variety of reasons why people came here: trade, diplomacy. Some people came up here for Christianity, but records will show that even for the next 20, 30 years, we still had a traditional council, and we still were practicing ceremonies, Thanksgiving ceremonies that we're familiar with even today. So I guess the point I'm getting at is that because we had different Ungwehunga nationalities, it was probably ambiguous when we first got here how the settlement was going to govern itself. And probably by the probably right away, but we know for sure that by the 1670s, Kahnawake was modeled after a Kanien'kehá:ka National Council. And when I say that, I'm talking about clan leadership for the Turtle, Wolf, and Bear clan. In fact, I think that was probably one of the reasons the Hurons left in 1677 or whenever it was, when they moved out to what's now called Wendake or Lorette.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might have felt a little stifled by the Kanien'kehá:ka nationalism that was probably here. But if we look at the records of Father Lafiteau when he spent time in Kahnawake in between 1714 1717, around that period, if anybody's familiar with Lafiteau, he was a Jesuit who was stationed here, a young Jesuit, and he recorded everything he saw.
Mm-hmm.
So when he talks about ceremonies, he talks about even old Kanien'kehá:ka words are in there, and he talks in detail about the composition of our traditional council at that time, which he describes as a gynocracy ruled by the women. But he does talk about what he called the Senate, which is the council of chiefs that was preoccupied by men, but maybe not exclusively by men. And he describes 4 components that made up the Senate or the council. He describes two classifications of chiefs. The first class he called Royane Gowa, so big chiefs, right?
Yeah.
And we could deduce that maybe that means that they're league chiefs or that are in a specific title line, clanship title line. And then the next classification are, they used the term agodianer, but Rodianer. I'm not exactly sure why they used feminine prefix in front of a lot of the words the Lafito uses, but it's in reference to the chiefs, the Rodianer. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what's the distinction between Royaner Goa and Rodianer, and I could just assume that they're talking about league chiefs as opposed to maybe civil chiefs or village chiefs. Or it could be a chief and his deputy, his sub-chief. But it talks about the way they meet. And there was two other components to the Senate. The Rodiscoregete, the warriors of the village, were often in the council meetings, and Rokstan, the elders of the village. They all had a place in the council. But he's very clear that it's organized by three clans: Turtle Clan, Wolf Clan, and Bear Clan. So it's got a very Ganyakahaga characteristic to the council, the way it worked.
But this is before we were here. Or
No, this is here.
This is
Well,
here.
not necessarily in
on the
Ganawa.
St.
no,
Lawrence.
It was still, that's true, 1716.
Lafito would have been
16.
here.
Okay.
Lafito would have been here
Yeah.
1714 to 1717.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
all right.
right.
So he's describing what he sees, and again,
He probably would have been, if you're 714, he would be almost in the movement from the last.
He was here.
Yeah,
He was
and
here from
the
the
move
last, yeah.
to the present
In fact,
site.
he plays a big role in the move,
yeah.
which we don't need to get into.
No,
but he
no.
plays a big role in why we left the KSS
Okay.
area to
Yeah.
come
But
here.
this is just
Yeah.
what he's observed of the political
yeah.
body. Okay.
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
all really interesting.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting.
And, I don't really want to get so much into a separate timeline, but because of our proximity to the French, we find ourselves, I guess, closer to the French than to the English, while our kin that remained in the valley and the rest of the Confederacy sided with the English in a lot of these campaigns, traded with them.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a proximity relationship to the French. Again, I don't really want to spend too much
Right.
time on that, but it really came to the head during French and Indian Wars, and I think in between 1754, 1763, in between that period, there's a war that's taking place here, and we're forced to take part in that war, and unfortunately we do side along with the French. And we're joined also by our kin, Akwesasne and Ganasdage, and a few other villages that are along the St. Lawrence, who historians refer to now as the Seven Nations of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it was an alliance of Ungwehuma communities that were allied with the French, who were situated along the St. Lawrence. And this was encouraged by the French because these Ungwehuma settlements acted as a buffer
yeah.
in between New France and the British that might come here to engage. And so we were like caught in between. We were a buffer, and the French strategically placed us here for that.
Everything is the placement too.
Mm-hmm.
So, the placement of the community. I mean, again, I don't want to take it like you said it, but even like the idea of putting, we want to get the fort, and so on. The placement of there, and although it was never used to our understanding in any kind of a conflict situation, it was there as in case.
Yeah.
And it was in case there was movement from down upriver. And then you look at the other was in the Abenakis up the St. Francis River and all of those, and primarily protecting Montreal and the sceneries downriver.
Yeah.
So that's just, and you think of the geographical part makes a lot of sense.
Right.
That's what I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we're kind of an autonomous unit, political unit that's up here. But after, or I guess when the British descend on Montreal in 1760, there's a parley that takes place at the Iroquois community of Oswego at Thousand Islands. And there's primarily Onondaga, some Oneida, probably some Cayuga that are living in that settlement. And there's a parley that takes place with General Amherst and maybe Sir William Johnson. I can't really remember. And it's not so much a treaty as it was a battlefield arrangement to say, if you attack Montreal, we're not going to get in the way of that. And on the British side, if we don't attack, then the British are going to not bother with us.
Mm-hmm.
And extend a relationship to those villages that are situated along the St. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what happens. They go to Montreal. Montreal surrenders without firing a shot. And Kahnawaga's relationship now changes from the French to the British. And there's a treaty that takes place right here in Kahnawake in September of 1760 called the Treaty of Kahnawake. Were brought into the Covenant chain at that time, and there's also Confederacy delegates that are attending this treaty council, and we're told that we're going to reunite as formerly, implying that we're going to be brought back into the auspices of the Confederacy, and that we would almost have our hands slapped. Don't go against the Confederacy again. And like I said, now we have a relationship with the British, and so there's a regime change that takes place around that time. And instead of this network or alliance of 7 communities along the St. Lawrence being completely autonomous, I would describe the 7 nations as a cohesive political unit that's in the dominion of the Rotinonhsión Confederacy. Because of our proximity along the St. Lawrence, we were afforded a lot of autonomy, political autonomy, to make a lot of calls on our own.
Mm-hmm.
But we also had to make sure that we tried to keep those decisions in line with Rotinonhsión policy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's other people who have different opinions on that. There's some people who think that the 7 nations was completely autonomous, or that it was dictated by the church, their political positions. I disagree with some of those sentiments, although I would respect anybody who would share those kind of opinions with me. But I do think that it was under the auspices of the Rotinonhsión Confederacy, but we were politically semi-autonomous up here.
It's like we're on a separate island there,
Like a province.
And so that distance thing was really, geographically, again, we got to always keep that in mind. I find like we're so far away. It's not like when you're Mohawk Valley and then on towards what is around present day Buffalo, should we say? There's the river, the Mohawk River. There's like the highway there.
Yeah.
The distance.
Yeah.
Between we are out on our own island.
Sure.
And so that has to play a factor.
And I often describe the St. Lawrence River as the economic highway into the New World. So, of course, it was a very prosperous place to be, and that's why a lot of our communities set up shop up here.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't completely religion like a lot of historians would suggest.
Yeah.
So, at the turn of the century, going into the 1800s, the village of Oswego, which is part of the 7 Nations Alliance. It's not really nations, right? Villages, populations. They're forced out of their settlement, and a lot of them end up moving to Akwesasne and probably filter into Kahnawake as well, which is why we have a lot of Snipe Clan people in our communities, especially Akwesasne. They have a significant Snipe Clan population, and Deer Clan. Some of those Deer Clan actually might have been around when we first moved, because there was also a significant Onondaga population when we first came up here from the valley. Mm-hmm. But in any case, what we start to see in between the 1830s in 1840s is a reorganization of our political council, of our traditional council. So instead of having the characteristics of a Ganyakahaga National Council, it's now a 7-clan council of chiefs. And
in what year was that?
In between 1830 and 1840, we start seeing records that are showing 7 clans. Before we started, we were talking about 1830s, and there is a record that shows 18 chiefs that make up Kahnawaga's political council. And initially, when I looked at that list, I said, wow, if it's following the National Council model, it makes a lot of sense. 9 chiefs and maybe 9 sub-chiefs or deputies. But when I looked at the document a little bit closer, we see that 6 of those chiefs are grand chiefs, and the rest are chiefs. So I started trying to do math a little bit, because later on it's a 7-clan council. Maybe there's a vacancy among those grand chiefs. And if we look at the split of the rest of it, assuming it was 7, and then my math might be off, but it evens out to almost like each grand chief would have 2 assistants. And it might be so close, like we were talking about the Patriots Rebellion before we started. You know, we're still very close to the warrior era. And so a lot of times, a lot of clanships not only had civil chiefs, but they had war chiefs. So maybe there was a grand chief, his deputy, and a war chief that's all connected to that clan. But we don't know, because they never put clan affiliation in the record that I'm sharing with you. By the 1840s, we see that it's arranged by 7 clans. So I'll rattle off the 7 clans. So there's Rotinonhsión, Turtle Clan, Rotinonhsión, or Rodigwaho, a Wolf Clan, Rodiskarewake, the Great Bear Clan, Rodiskarewagayu, Old Bear Clan, Rotinonhsión, Snipe Clan, Rotinonhsión, Rock Clan, and
Deer.
And Rodisanage, Deer Clan. And so it looks like now each of those clans has a chief, probably installed by a clan mother, although probably due to the patriarchal nature of who's keeping the records, we don't really see who the clan mothers are in this way. But we do know that the token of their chieftainship, you know, we're accustomed to hearing wampum credentials for the Rodianer, but they would use medals. They would be given a medal from the British to denote that they're the recognized chief for that clan. And then that medal would transfer to the successor chief. So starting around, in between 1830s and 1840s, there is a transition to a restructured traditional council in Kahnawake. You know, like anything else, there's always going to be accusations of incompetence or corruption. Any government, you know, it doesn't matter if it's an elected council or a traditional council. And we see a lot of evidence and complaints that are coming forth from community members about maybe some of the chiefs are being not so effective as being leaders. But, you know, we don't really...
This is all in like this is all
1800s now.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is all in that era.
And
Even back home.
yeah. So I guess where I'm going to go right now is the 1870s. So in the 1870s, Canada, which is a new country, the Dominion of Canada, it's still a British protectorate, but it's got self-governing powers by 1867, In 1870, there's an Enfranchisement Act that Canada is looking to impose upon Ungwehue peoples. And there's an early form of, I guess, what we would now call as band councils or elected councils that are looking at being posted in Ungwehue communities, much like the Indian Act, which would only be a few years later. And there's a big gathering that takes place in Grand River, and they call it the General Council of the Six Nations. And Kahnawake sends its traditional chiefs there. I think they send 3 chiefs. And Kanisidake, Akwesasne, they send their chiefs there. And what's notable, and I don't really want to get into a whole Seven Nations debate, but I'll just share something that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
When the firekeepers are welcoming everybody to the council, they specifically welcome the delegates from Kahnawake, Akwesasne, and Kanisidake, and the firekeeper identifies those 3 communities as the 7th nation of the Rotinonhsión. And and that always, it might be a mistake on the firekeeper's part to use that kind of nomenclature for, he probably knows 7 nations, but doesn't know the context. Maybe. Or maybe they viewed that alliance of 7 villages as its own political unit, as a part of the Confederacy. If people want to talk about that later, I do have a theory that that's what this alliance was.
I guess again, it could be about being further away, being with so long influenced by the French, all of these kinds of things. There's some, I guess, chance, that they've this area had evolved enough that in the eyes of people at Grand River, you're just saying, in their eyes, there's a whole different culture, there's a whole different way of that. Well, and again, but similar also, enough to say that, and these, they're their own because it's a mixture of here, it's a mixture of that.
It's the late 1800s, right?
The
1870s right now.
Yeah. So it's kind of understandable to me. Again, I like to always go back to the context of what's happening.
Yeah.
What's going on around, and so you put that in there and you can't just look at it, but I really think that's possible.
Yeah. and maybe that's a good topic for a show on its own, because I do have a theory that Kahnawake was the capital of a small political unit that was under the auspices of the Confederacy. But we could get into that another time. But so you had a question?
No, I just I guess I mean, the time. I'm just what you're saying about being so far away, and I would.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's no cars, right? There's no
That's
internet.
what I mean. There's no.
So it makes sense that we would have the latitude to make decisions on our own. Again,
that's what I mean.
in making sure that at least our policies are aligned with the Confederacy. And we do see that. I don't mean to say.
I know.
Just before the War of 1812, there's a Six Nations Council that takes place in 1808 in Buffalo Creek, which was the temporary council fire of the Six Nations Confederacy, at least on the New York side. And delegates from, it says, the Kahnawake Nation, it refers to it as a nation. The 7 tribes of the Kahnawake Nation come to the council asking, if war breaks out again between the British and the Americans, whose side should we fight on? And the council says, we're asking you to stay neutral. So it's showing that there's a subordination, at least, to Confederacy policy by the Kahnawake chiefs that are there.
Okay.
But it's also interesting that they refer to the 7 tribes of the Kahnawake Nation because it's putting it all under
one umbrella kind
and,
of.
And I don't want to get away from all that, and that sounds really good. But it's also who's writing these documents, who's keeping records.
Sure.
So we always have to look at that. Who's actually doing it? They're talking to, maybe they do have some knowledge of the language enough, but also maybe they're just asking, what are they talking about? So the persons who their best. The person's telling them their English or their French or whatever it's written down in isn't particularly strong. So that's their best description. So there could be a lot of different, because we're not there saying, you know, oh, this person writing
that
it
puzzle
down
together.
That puzzle exactly is it. We got to look at who's writing it down a little bit too.
Yeah,
that throws that question mark in there.
Yeah. So this is all late.
This is still 1870s.
1870s. So then.
But what we see in the late 1870s, going to the 1880s, is a decline in the population of the traditional council. So the 7-clan council, by like the late 1770s, early 1880s, there's only 3 chiefs that are on the council, and it's and the rest of those seats are vacant. And I think that it's agitating a lot of community members who are expecting more from their government, from their community government, but you only have 3 men that are working on that council to make things happen. So we do start seeing petitions of community members going to the government asking for the election of chiefs. So it's easy to look at that and focus on the word election as being connected to a voting system. But if you look at the language a lot in these petitions and in the records, the election of chiefs could be synonymous with appointment of chiefs. But they're using the word election.
Yeah, because that's what their frame of reference is. That's their understanding of how people choose in their system in 1870, whatever. They're saying, well, these elections, even though those elections are, very...
But it could be easily interpreted by the Indian agent that they want an elected council. Because they have a demand for the election of chiefs. And that's what we start seeing as early as 1875. There's petitions asking for term limits on chiefs, because up until that point, these were life chiefs, and that they were there based on merit. If you're doing a good job in representing your clan family at the council, you just stay in there until your clan mother says you're out. But it sounds like there's people who are insisting on 3-year periods because it would force elections. I think they felt that if they didn't put these limits on it, and I'm trying to rationalize why they're asking for this, and this is the best I could think of, is that it's forcing them to be more active, and it's forcing them to kind of reboot every 3 years. And but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're looking for an elected council more than they just want the election of
like a reassessment chiefs. Of it.
Yeah,
a reassessment of the job they're doing. It's like saying, are they doing a good job? And there could be a lot of reasons why there's people who are
But this is happening because there's
there's a concern that the council is just non-functioning.
It's not operating.
That it's being very ineffectual as a government.
But isn't this a time now where, of course, Canada's in place there, and everything I read, they're obviously making more efforts to they've already done that, but now there's even more efforts to control, and to cut costs.
This is kind of
you see it all the time. I've read a number of those where it's just like, it's a little too expensive, so they make those decisions entirely. Meaning,
dollars and
Canada,
cents.
Dollars and cents. It's like, well, how do we cut the costs on this? Let's and trying to be get these agents that are now in place. I don't know if you're going to talk about
it's going to get
agent.
To that, for sure.
But this is before the Indian Act, or
the Indian Act had already passed, but it hasn't taken hold in this community yet.
Okay.
So we still have a traditional council, and in fact, there's a referendum that takes place in 1878 where the community holds fast to having life chiefs. Just looking at the document I have here, out of the 42 people that vote, 24 supported the life chiefs, and 18 people went for that 3-year arrangement. Again, it might be implying that they want an elected council, or they just might want term limits. But what's important to note, and why people might think that it's a direct reference to the Indian Act, is because Section 72 of the Indian Act demands an election every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that 3 years might come from, and why a lot of people would say, well, these people want the Indian Act. I'm not sure if they so much want the Indian Act, and maybe they do, more than they want an effective government that's doing their job.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
But what we see happen in 1884 is something that's very significant. It's called the Indian Advancement Act, which is a more aggressive maneuver or legislation that Canada uses to impose elected councils in our community. So prior to the Advancement Act in 1884, there was, because they update these laws every so often, so the Indian Act was 1876, but in 1880 there was a revision of the Indian Act, which provided a conditional acceptance of the Indian Act, of an elected council if a community applied to have it. So it put the onus on each individual community to ask if they want that. And
an elected system.
Like that, it's optional, right?
Yeah.
That the
Right.
bank council system's optional. It's not necessarily imposed like it was in the earlier iterations of the Indian Act.
Okay.
The 1880 revision of the Indian Act kind of makes it optional. And I think that the Indian Department realized, you know what? They're not applying.
Yeah.
So let's create new legislation that overrides the 1880 optional law to have an Indian Act, and give the discretion to the Indian Department to impose it if they want to. So they would under the Indian Advancement Act, they would have the right to impose. The Indian Department would have the right to impose an elected council in Ungwe communities.
Okay. Yeah.
So what we see in 1884 is a mobilization from community members against the Advancement Act. But a lot of things have to happen.
Oh, that name just itself, the name of that act, Indian Advancement, tells you that, that colonial way of thinking. Canada, it's just one other, just the name itself, saying, well, these people will, it's a way to make them be more civilized, advanced, whatever, to the level we think they should be.
It's a smug term, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to have to resort to my glasses also to keep track of my notes. But we talked about enfranchisement earlier. There's evidence that some community members are opting for enfranchisement, and there's even some progressive Gahnawage Ronu that express their gratitude in a very formal way.
Maybe just I think I understand what, but maybe you might want to just mention what enfranchisement is, because not everyone actually probably who might listen is clear what that
defines. Enfranchisement really means assimilation into Canadian society.
Yeah.
You're a citizen, you're allowed to vote, you have all the rights of Canadians, other Canadians.
And in a lot of cases,
thank you. I was one of those people. No.
I'm just kidding. But like, for example, enfranchisement, you could receive a lump sum of money to extinguish your rights as a Ungwe person in exchange for being
that was the carrot right there for some people, depending on their situation. And is this say, hey, go ahead and franchise, but in return you would give up certain things, and in return we'll give you this lump sum of money.
Yeah. And I've even heard before that professionals, if you wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor, you had to be enfranchised. You had to give up your rights as a Ungwe person in order to have that profession. Yeah,
there were two things, lawyers and doctors.
Yeah. So, but we're a very diverse community, and we did have progressive I'll use the word progressive because that's the way they would have described it. People who wanted to be assimilated. We did have people that wanted that. And so we see that there's actually people who did that, and they were very thankful that they were enfranchised. So we talked a little bit about Section 72 of the Indian Act to force the election of new chiefs. In 1887, 54 Gahnawage Hironu petitioned to invoke Section 72 of the Indian Act to force an election. Again, I would say that it's a strategy. It's not so much that these people are looking to replace the traditional council. They just want to be able to elect the vacant seats,
right?
To appoint people in those vacant seats. They're using the word election, and by using Section 72 of the Indian Act, they might think that by using their own law, Canadian law, that they would be able to force Canada to recognize the appointment of these chiefs to these vacant seats. I'll tell you why we think that later on, but right now we know that 54 Gahnawage Hironu petitioned to invoke Section 72 of the Indian Act in Gahnawage. We move to and by this point, again, there's only 3 chiefs left. There's only 3 chiefs that are left on the council. In January of 1888, there's a meeting that's called by the principal Indians of the community. We don't really know what that means, but if the Indian agent is the one who's reporting on it, and it is, he might be meeting with the people he wants to meet with. He might be meeting with the progressives that he thinks are principal. But in any case, at this meeting that takes place, there's still a desire to have some kind of elections. And the Indian agent at the time, his name was Brosseau. And Brosseau says, well, if you're going to do this, you got to do it fast. You want the Advancement Act, you got to ask for it fast, because every moment we lose gives more credence to the people who want the old system. So he's pressuring people to say that we should have the Advancement Act here in the community. But he falsely reports to Indian Affairs that the consensus of everyone in attendance was to have the Indian Act. But it's not exactly true, because there are people who are saying that they still desire the old system. Yeah. So not long after that, we're still in 1888, 160 Gahnawage Hironu petition Canada again, demanding elections. What's significant here is that some of the names that were on that 1887 petition of 54 people, their names appear here as well.
Got some of the names?
What's that?
You have some of the names?
We do, actually.
Oh, you do?
We do have the record of everyone who signed that. But again, these people are invoking Section 72 of the Indian Act that is calling for an election every 3 years. And it's, again, it's not so much that they want a bank council. It might be that they just want a functioning traditional council that require the installation of new chiefs.
There seems to be a division, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's being...
I have to look at my notes a little bit more carefully, but some of these petitions are given by clan. So here's the Bear Clan names of the people who are advancing this petition. Here's the Turtle Clan people. So why are they organizing themselves in that fashion?
Yeah.
So it might be reinforcing the idea that they just want a functioning traditional council more than they want an elected council. And it even goes as far as Parliament, where the local MP of St. Isidore says, well, we think that the Indians, I met with the principal Indians, and they seem like they're really keen on having the Advancement Act apply. And they're very careful when they're in all these petitions. They don't want the Advancement Act. So that's why I think they're trying to invoke, they're trying to jump the gun. They're trying to get new chiefs, traditional chiefs, before the Advancement Act is pushed
Yeah,
on them.
remember that he said you better do it. He was putting pressure.
That's it.
All.
That's
Putting
it.
pressure
He's
on them.
putting pressure.
But
on them.
but at the time, the Minister of the Interior isn't available to. He's not at Parliament that day, so they defer the decision to apply the Advancement Act in Kahnawake at least for a little bit longer. Something separate is brewing on the state side at this time, and probably would warrant its own discussion. But and I didn't cover that part about
Which
the Grand River Council as opposed to the New York
yes.
side. And I'll say that just very quickly, that after the American Revolution, Buffalo Creek is the interim headquarters of the Six Nations Confederacy. But at the same time, after the American Revolution, you have a lot of exiled Rotinonhsión who are homeless, staying at Fort Niagara, and after the American Revolution, they make their way to Grand River, and they establish a settlement there, and so you have two distinct Iroquois population centers congregating at Grand River, or they're congregating at Buffalo Creek. Buffalo Creek gets sold in 1838, ratified in 1842, which makes it no longer accessible as a meeting place. So before that happens, they say that there was a meeting that took place at Buffalo Creek with people from Grand River and people who lived on the New York side, and oral tradition anyway, from people who I've talked to, will say that they came to an amicable arrangement to split the council fire between the U.S. side and the Canadian side. I hate saying that.
Right.
I hate using that
Yeah,
terminology.
yeah.
But basically, the rationale was, there's no cars, there's no
Right.
things
Yeah,
like that.
that's it.
So it would make sense to take a piece of the council fire and kindle it at
In
Grand
Grand
River
River.
and have them deliberate on issues that affect their region.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe they would have rekindled their council fire in Onondaga to have the communities on the state side or New York side congregate there to deliberate on issues that affect them. So I've been told that it was an amicable relationship, that amicable arrangement that created these the splitting of the council fire. It wasn't a thing that was done out of anger or hostility, or maybe it was. We don't know. But what I heard is that it was amicable. And then some people will say, well, it wasn't so much that they split the fire, that they split the wampum inventory, the wampum
Who had
belts.
what? Who had
Some
what?
people will say that. Some people say it was titles. We don't know.
What year was that again?
It's before 1838
Okay.
or 1842. It's before then. I haven't been able to pinpoint when this exactly happened, but we know that in 1842, Buffalo Creek is sold, so it's no longer able to serve as the temporary headquarters of the Confederacy.
yeah.
And the ones who are still living on the New York side, they rekindle the Confederacy fire at Onondaga.
Onondaga.
So it's amicable, but in time, they became very. They end up having a rivalry between these two fires, both claiming to be the real Confederacy. Where this comes into play is there's a good part of the second half of the 1800s, maybe 1860s, 1870s into the 1880s, where the communities on the New York side are trying to get compensation for lands promised to them in Kansas, of all places. It's a long story about why New York State made an offer to lands in Kansas. Actually, it might have been the Ogden's Land Company. I'll have to look that back up. But they were promised lands in Kansas. And as New York State, as they sued the U.S. government for compensation for these lands promised in Kansas, New York State was throwing anything at them to discourage this complaint from taking any shape. So, according to oral tradition, one of the things that they threw at them was, you're not even the Six Nations Confederacy anymore. You have no Mohawks that sit on this council. So how could you claim to be the Six Nations Confederacy? So the communities on the New York side had to think, well, who's Mohawk that's in New York State? And they thought of Akwesasne. So at the Cold Springs Longhouse in Allegheny in 1888, a group of Akwesasne are summoned to sit in that meeting, and Akwesasne is named as the successors of the Mohawk Nation. And again, it's not that they chose families that were traditional, or they chose families that were I have heard that they were political families that were disenchanted with the three trustee system, the three chiefs trustee system on the U.S. side.
Tribal council,
But in any case, it was really to satisfy what they felt was a requirement to make them Six Nations again. So that was in 1888. And a couple of years later, in 1890, there's actually a condolence that takes place in Akwesasne, where the Confederacy on the New York side condole a set of chiefs at Akwesasne and give them a wampum signifying their council fire of the nation. It kind of connects to this timeline, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's more for context of what's happening outside of Kahnawake, because what's happening on the outside eventually affects what's happening on the inside. But what we see in the next couple of years, I think it was in 1894, there's a Grand Council that takes place in Akwesasne, and Kahnawake is invited. So Kahnawake attends, and they put out a statement, actually, reminding everyone that we have a right to our own way of government, our own council, our own constitution, and Kahnawake signs off on it. And I'm jumping way ahead with this part of the story. I'll probably reel it back in. But it's a band councilor that signs the statement on behalf of Kahnawake, which is pretty interesting. But I'll get to that in a little while.
Just a little breadcrumb.
Yeah. Because I jumped like 10 years.
Yeah. That's fine.
What do they call that?
You jumped the gun.
You jumped the gun.
Yeah.
But what I want everybody to know is that there's things happening on the U.S. side that's that is going to eventually coincide with what's happening here.
Yeah, there's everything you look at things, and again, this is about the third time I say that, but what's happening on the U.S. side, it affects, even though we say, some of these things, there was all conflicts in the U.S., they're still, they have their civil war, and then so you have to look at that context. They're more aggressive, in certain things now. They're all of that kind of thing impacts decisions.
So jumping. But
so I'll continue with the timeline. So we're in 1889 now.
Okay.
And there's a general meeting that takes place in the community, and they say, we're ready to put up chiefs. we're ready to put up chiefs. We can't wait for Canada. Let's start looking at putting chiefs up, and then we'll ask Canada to confirm these chiefs when we put them in place. Not long after that, there's another petition of 210 Kahnawake Hironu that call for an immediate election of new chiefs. What's the strange phrasing is that they're asking for an election of new chiefs while waiting for the Advancement Act to apply. It might be that they're resigned to the fact that they know Canada is going to be pushing this, because they had already made an attempt in Parliament to impose the Advancement Act here to call for a bank council. So they might be just resigned, but still at the same time, maybe they think that they would be able to circumvent the installation of a bank council by having a functioning traditional council. At the same time, there's a petition of 5 Kahnawake Hironu who ask Canada for the Advancement Act. They're all farmers, but these are the first people who are asking for the Advancement Act specifically. Everyone else is asking for the election of chiefs, or they're asking for an election to take place every 3 years. Yeah. But nobody at this point has asked for the Advancement Act. Well, Brousseau, the Indian agent, jumps on that. He's like, we have people who have formally asked, Kahnawake has formally asked for the Advancement Act to apply in Kahnawake. So like a month later, not even a month later, like a week or two later, the Privy Council of Canada decrees the application of the Indian Advancement Act in Kahnawake and calls for elections to be held in 6 electoral sections immediately.
It would be like 20 people today saying, hey, we want to build another bridge through our territory and go into Montreal side. Yeah. Oh, yeah, let me ask for it.
Yeah. Yep.
On those lines, yeah.
5
to me,
farmers,
anyway, that's
5 farmers,
yeah. Whatever.
Their names are there.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Start reading them. No, I'm just kidding.
So the first bank council elections are called in March, like literally days after, a week after the Privy Council decrees the application of the Advancement Act. The first bank council elections are held. They're held on March 26th. And again, they break it up into sections. So there's 6 sections in Kahnawake. Section 6 is probably the most sought after section because it's the most populated. And so one of the chiefs who gets elected, the one who gets elected for Section 6 is a man named Louis Jackson. I don't know if you've ever heard of this man. Louis Jackson was one of the main guys on the Nile expedition in 1884, one of the river pilots that was sent to the Sudan.
Oh, yeah?
He was probably the head dude, the most well-known.
That's another
and
podcast
he wrote
himself.
Sure. And he wrote his memoirs. But the thing about Louis Jackson is that he's a noted supporter of the traditional council. Yeah. And even prior to this, we see his name affixed to petitions that are calling for the recognition of our traditional council. Yeah. So he gets voted, I think by 200 votes, to be the chief of Section 6. Well, Brousseau disqualifies Jackson, saying, well, he's not really a resident of that district, but it's probably because he's trying to discourage.
Right.
He's trying to discourage
Makes sense.
Him
that he
from.
would do that.
He probably knows that the first order of business, because Seneca's tried this. As soon as the first elected council got in, they passed a resolution to go back to the old system.
Yeah.
So the Senecas tried this in the 1840s. So Brousseau probably thought that Jackson's probably going to try to reinstitute the old system. Yeah. So he disqualifies him. Another election is called on April 1st. And even though Jackson was eventually vindicated, he was disqualified from being able to participate in the April 1st elections. Thomas Jocks, who was one of the traditional chiefs, in fact, I think the 3 remaining traditional chiefs were given honorary status on this council because they were on the old council. Maybe the Indian agent thought, well, let's throw these guys a bone so that they'll validate this new elected council system.
Keep people quiet.
But turns out the results of the election really splits the band council in half, the first band council. So you have 2 or 3 who are pro-traditional government, and you have, I won't even say pro-traditional government, I'll say there's people who are progressive and conservative. The progressives favor enfranchisement or to be a part of Canada. The conservatives want to stay by the old way.
Yeah.
So, and we see, it's funny because we use these terms a lot now for contemporary politics, like in Canada and the United States, where we talk about liberals and conservatives. But the funny thing is, in a lot of these petitions, the community is described as being split between liberal and conservative. The liberals being progressive, wanting to enfranchise, not really the way we would identify a liberal today or a conservative today. It's our own brand of what these words would mean in the community. So we have a band council starting in 1889. In the 1890 election, there's another election that takes place in 1890 because these band council elections are being held every year at this point. So Louis Jackson is elected as he gets in this time, and he's the main councillor, they would call it that person, the chief councillor. It sounds like the rest of the band council will vote on who is the mayor or the chief councillor. And we still see that there's a handful of traditional people who were on the traditional council who are now on the elected council. In December of 1889, 121 Kahnawake Hironu petitioned Canada to restore the traditional council immediately. This is like there hasn't been an elected council the elected council is about a year old, and they're already saying we want the old system back. And what's pretty cool about this petition is that it's signed by the 7 nations of Kahnawake and describes their nationality as being Rotinonhsión. I think that's significant because up until this point, they're talking about traditional chiefs and having a traditional government, but there's almost no relationship or connection to the Rotinonhsión Confederacy as an institution. This is one of the first times we see documented that they're describing their nationality as Rotinonhsión.
Again, who's writing this?
This petition is us this time.
Yeah.
So that's,
we wrote that.
That's why that's why I'm saying it's pointing out that might be, as you said, even more significant for that argument, for that point of view.
Yeah.
Depending on who's
that is very significant. Like for sure.
And then not long after that, there's a petition from women in the Bear Clan who are asking for the traditional council to apply against. So there's a mobilization now
to ask for the old system
to try to get that back, or to restore it. And again, I think that's what was always happening.
Right.
When anytime they said that they're advocating for the election of new chiefs, I think they're talking about restoring the vacancies or filling the vacancies on the existing traditional council. But Canada was using that to say, look, these guys want elections. They want it. So because Akwesasne is in the same boat, there's a meeting that's held in Akwesasne in October of 1890 with delegations from Kahnawake, Kanesatake, Oneida, Six Nations, and Tuscarora who attend this meeting to discuss the desired abolition of their councils and the abolition of the councils, meaning band council system, and a return to the government by chiefs. So they're advocating for a return to traditional government as well. So again, there's a mobilization that's happening, but things start to get dirty. Things start to get dirty at this time.
This is like the late 1800s there.
Yeah.
90 what? 1890.
This is 1890, and now we're going to 1891. One of the chiefs, his name is Michael Montour. He was one of the last traditional chiefs, but now on the elected council. But there's still a split that's happening between the progressives and
within the elected council.
And one of the main progressive leaders, liberal leaders, whatever you want to call them, who are advocating for assimilation, is the famous Big John Canadian. So Big John Canadian starts what I would describe as a smear campaign against proponents of the traditional system. So one conflict that makes the papers is his smear job of Michael Montour. And he says, he accuses him of bootlegging, and which is an offense that would get him off the council. Montour denies it and says, "Oh yeah, I too could play at this game." And so he makes the same accusations against Big John Canadian and some of the liberals that he describes as the liberals. But it starts to get dirty. The food starts to get dirty, but it's clear that
even then, crazy.
It's clear that Big John Canadian is leading the charge against proponents of a traditional system, and it gets messier. Messier. So I mentioned that in 1890 there was a condolence of chiefs in Akwesasne who established a relationship with the New York side of the Confederacy. I mentioned that there was a Grand Council that took place in Akwesasne in 1894, and they did put out a statement. I'll read what they say. The Indian Act only breeds sorrow, contention, hatred, disrespect of family ties, spite against one another, and absence of unity amongst us Indians. It creates two distinct parties at elections. This law was never authorized in its adaptation among the Indians. The statement was signed by 6 delegates, probably for each nation, but one of the people who signed it is a bank counselor named Joe Foster, and from Kahnawake. I'm still not exactly sure why they would have allowed something like that, but we see Joe Foster appear later as a big supporter of traditional government. But what's really significant about this Grand Council that takes place, this is probably the first Grand Council that takes place in this region in over a century. Another significant thing that happens is Seth Newhouse goes to this council. So if anybody's not familiar with who Seth Newhouse is, Seth Newhouse was a pine tree chief at Grand River, who was a strong advocate for traditional government, supporter of the Confederacy, anti-Indian Act, and creates a manuscript that codifies the Great Law, puts it in writing, probably for the first time. And he does that for 2 reasons. One reason is for them to stick to the playbook, and so they have a guide to help them through their counseling process. But he also wants to show Canada we have no need for the Indian Act. We have our own constitution. So he creates a 300-page manuscript that explains how the Great Law works. That becomes very prevalent later on when it's published in the 20th century. But what's really remarkable is that Seth Newhouse shows up at this meeting, and he leaves behind a copy of his manuscript. So it's like he planted a seed there for people to, like, I think in our minds in the 1880s, 1890s, we know what the old system means, but in terms of it being a part of the Confederacy, I think that that's the part that was kind of missing. That nationalism
Right.
of being a part of the Confederacy was kind of missing.
We're thinking only about Kahnawake,
Mm-hmm.
and then not how so much we fit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we lost or we were not aware of that, and how the whole Confederacy functions or should function.
Yeah.
That is, I think it's very significant. I think
Sure.
it's a whole different, you
So-
said, a mindset.
So not long after that, let's see what October that took place. In November, there's 250 Kahnawake Hironu who petitioned the Superintendent General of Indian Affairs to return to their ancient constitution. Already we're using the nomenclature of the Confederacy. You don't see any reference to the Constitution before that. That's a Newhouse term.
Just the old ways, they would say, things like that.
Yeah, the old
ways,
system, the old ways.
and then some of them would look, well, what is it? Well, it's what we usually do, but
Yeah.
now it's the Constitution.
So
and
it's
the timing
it's
seems
no
right.
doubt influenced by
Yeah.
this Grand Council. It's no
Yeah.
doubt influenced by the Newhouse manuscript that's left behind because already they're demanding the recognition to return to their ancient constitution, government by the chiefs. So the following year in 1895, there is a meeting that takes place between some 400 Kahnawake Hironu. We hear that there's probably some delegates from Akwesasne that are in attendance, and they meet with the Superintendent General. His name was Teiowí, and his deputy. And the whole discussion has to do with the bank council system. But a referendum is held. I don't know if it's held at this meeting or shortly before then, but the referendum clearly is in favor of traditional government. So they end up pushing this daily to advance their petition to recognize the traditional council again.
Was that about 1895?
This is 1895.
And you said 400 people?
400 people attend this meeting, reported anyway.
Where'd they meet, in the arena? Not just no, I
It-
guess
it-
obviously
yeah.
outside somewhere.
It could be that they just tallied the 400
Yeah.
votes that were cast in
That
the
could be.
referendum.
Yeah, that could be too.
But in the record, it says some 400 people attended this
Yeah.
meeting. But in any case, it's on record again by referendum that the community wants to go back to traditional government. Of course, the Indian agent has to report what's going on, and reports on. There's an agitation happening. There's an agitation to go back to traditional government. It's getting out of hand. He's asking for help now. So, a couple of years later, in 1897, there's another enfranchisement push. It's called the Dominion Franchise Act, and the elected council, the Bank Council of Kahnawake, releases a statement declaring that they don't want to be a part of this this new Franchise Act. But in the same statement, they recognized the petition of Kahnawake Hironu who want traditional government. So it's the Bank Council who's validating the political will of the community by saying, we want a traditional council. So even the Bank Council at that time is supporting traditional government at the time. 1898 is a really significant year. It's a big year. A lot of things happened in that year. So it seems like the community can't wait any longer. And without asking Canada's permission, they install 7 traditional chiefs and deputies at a community meeting. Based upon probably the momentum that's been building over the past few years, there's this Grand Council that takes place. We become more acquainted with Gainerdet Goa again. The Bank Council is actually supporting a traditional council. So one of the main guys who's against this is Big John Canadian, and he goes to the newspapers and starts really condemning them. He says, they didn't even have elections in a proper form. They went into districts but he's talking about clan meetings. He's saying that each leader was chosen by their family in that part of the community.
Yeah.
But he's talking that there's clan meetings where they're electing or
they're
appointing
choosing,
new
yeah.
chiefs for their traditional council. One of the main leaders of the traditional council or the movement itself is a man named Louis Tukanu. And he starts answering to everything Big John Canadian is saying. And he's saying, this is the way it's supposed to be done. We're meeting as clans, and the women in these clans are putting up the chiefs, and he should watch what he's saying because he's just causing trouble. And Big John Canadian's response to it is that it's all humbug. That's his quote. It's all humbug, this traditional government stuff.
It's all humbug. What a diss, eh? It's all humbug.
It must have been a real
and they do
for
make
the
reference.
time.
Yeah.
They do make reference to the referendum in 1895, saying that the community said they wanted traditional government. We're respecting that. So to get this, the Bank Council all resigns. In this is 1898. The Bank Council all resigns in favor of this traditional council. So you could imagine that the Indian Department is really concerned about this. The Superintendent General of Indian Affairs launches an investigation of the situations at Kahnawake and Akwesasne because it's getting out of hand. It's getting out of hand.
Yeah.
So the Bank Council signed a proper resignation letter at a community meeting, and they talk about that the people want to go back to the old system.
This is still
1898.
1898.
Yeah. So it's a really significant year.
Right.
But regardless, the Indian Department still calls elections to happen that year. I'm not sure if they're boycotted, if the election is boycotted, but elections are still called. There is a meeting that does take place between the traditional chiefs and the Indian Department, and they're like trying to get them to play ball, but the traditional chiefs are still steadfast that we require our own, we're going to do our own thing, and that's it. So, of course, they reject the Indian agent and the Indian Department reject it. Even the Indian agent Brosseau declares that he will not tolerate anyone going back to the old system. That same year, another significant thing happens, and it's there's a group of women who are trying to sell beadwork that they've made on the other side on the west side, and it sounds like they're having some trouble getting to the United States, and so they make a petition to the United States, asking for the United States to recognize their right to the border, to their right to that the border doesn't apply to them.
Right.
Early.
What's significant though is that the traditional council signs off on that declaration, and this is how we know who each of these leaders are.
Because
their
they
names
sign.
are there,
Yeah.
and I'll call attention to one in particular. Gahtardadirdu Bova is one of the traditional chiefs that was probably raised in 1898, and he becomes a significant figure for like the next 30 years in our politics, and advocate for traditional government. He becomes like one of the main guys. If there were chapters in this talk, we'd probably ended the first chapter. And we're getting to the turn of the century.
Right.
And the world is changing.
Sure.
And again, just what's going on, just don't forget that's, the men from the community are starting to get involved in ironwork, moving away. there's all of this. The farming is still going on, but
Quebec Bridge disaster.
Quebec Bridge, 7 years later,
Some time is going to pass by before we continue.
I don't want to.
But what you're saying is absolutely true. There's things are moving along.
The bridge is now here. The train bridge is here, and people are accessing without using. And it just, and people are going, like I said, into looking to. Transportation's easier. There's trains that take them, etc. Mm-hmm.
So we could assume that the 7 chiefs that are put up in 1898 continue for a little while, and it probably some of those people probably die in the next 20 years or so, and I would probably describe the chiefs as remnants of the traditional council, more than an actual functioning traditional council by the time we get into the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. A significant year to remember is 1915. What happens in 1915 is the Indian Department orders a lot of the Ungwe teachers in the community to be fired. Mm-hmm. And they hand over the educational reins of the community to the Sisters of St. Anne. Sisters of St. Anne is a Christian order, or more specifically Catholic order. Mm-hmm. And I'd have to confirm some of my information, but I've heard that one of the main proponents of this arrangement was a man named Frank MacDonald Jacobs. Frank MacDonald Jacobs I would describe definitely as progressive, but he was also a school teacher, and sometimes he even described himself as a lawyer. And he was on the Bank Council as the chief councilor or mayor, whatever you want to call him. And I would probably say at this time, the Bank Council was predominantly progressive now. Like, even though in 1898 the Bank Council resigned in favor of traditional government, well, that's almost 20-something years ago, So some people will say that Frank MacDonald Jacobs had the ear of Duncan Campbell Scott. Ever hear that name?
Yeah, he's the architect of the residential schools. Right? Yeah.
So he's pretty much the head of the Indian Department. And the order to hand over the educational reins to the Sisters of St. Anne was made by Duncan Campbell himself. And one of the people who are fired is the school administrator, a man named Peter DeLille. Peter DeLille was a proponent of traditional government, and it sounds like he's not going to take it lying down that this had happened. I don't need to get into it, but when the Sisters of St. Anne actually started to take control of education, that's when English becomes pushed in schools.
Yeah.
In a lot of schools in the community up until 1915, there's a lot of subjects were instructed in the language, in Ganyankeha. But once the Sisters of St. Anne set up shop here, well, that's when English was now imposed in the schools, enforced by corporal punishment. And, one of the main reasons that 30 years later we see the majority of the community not speaking the language is probably directly related to what happened in 1950.
Yeah.
So Peter DeLille, I can't say for sure if his political, how could I describe it, his political mobilization efforts are a result of getting fired, or if he was always political. That I don't know. What I do know is that he ends up being in a league with, and this is going to sound funny, with a man named Chief Thunderwater. Yeah. So Chief Thunderwater, he's a very interesting person.
With a name like Thunderwater.
Yeah.
So his name is actually Oghima Niagara, a.k.a. Thunderwater. And he's the leader of this pan-indigenous nationalist group called the Council of the Tribes. And he even before 1915, he's making the rounds in different communities, especially Rotinonhsión communities. In 1909, he's named as the Seneca ambassador by the Tonawanda Senecas. He's already going to Akwesasne and having these thunderwater gatherings. Yeah. And what he's advocating for is sovereignty, traditional government, go back to your old ways.
Nationalism.
He's a nationalist, and but it's a pan-indigenous nationalist entity. So it's not really aligned with the Rotinonhsión Confederacy, but he's setting himself up in a lot of Rotinonhsión communities. So somehow Peter DeLille hooks up with Chief Thunderwater. And we got pictures of the two of them together and what it looked like. And a year after Peter DeLille is fired, Kahnawake hosts a Thunderwater convention. And I suspect it didn't take place very far from here. I suspect it took place at the property of Gahtardadiru Bova, one of those traditional chiefs that was installed in 1898. Because there's a picture of the gathering, and we see the power lines that would go over the river, and they were in this area. And if you look at the picture, and if you look at pictures later of different gatherings at Gahtardadiru's property, which is identified as Gahtardadiru's property, it looks like it's the same place. So I suspect it's at Gahtardadiru's. So in September of 1916, this convention takes place. Peter DeLille is named as the Grand Counselor of the Kahnawake chapter of the Thunderwater movement of the Council of the Tribes. I suspect that others from the community were, I don't know what the word would be, inducted into this organization. But Peter DeLille is the Grand Counselor. And so Kahnawake becomes a very prominent leader in this Thunderwater
movement.
Yeah.
They tried to smear him.
They did. They tried to. They thought they could, if they identified him as he wasn't Ungwe, he was really a black man from Cleveland
and stuff like that.
Because he
was Cleveland.
Yes, that he was based in Cleveland. He was from Cleveland.
Yeah.
Or he was based in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
But it only would come out much later that Canada was actively smearing him. And they're the ones who invented the falsehood that he wasn't really Ungwe. Yeah. So, and it was effective because he did start to lose people after a while. I think Canada even banned him from being able to enter into Canada because he was causing
I think I read
so much
that
trouble.
somewhere too, yeah.
In 1917, the Thunderwater people decide that they're going to try to infiltrate the Bank Council elections, which is something we it's not, maybe this is the first time this has ever happened, but you hear people talk about infiltrating it.
Yeah.
But this is probably the first attempt.
Yeah.
And so they stack every section to be able to get into office, and it turns into a big fight with Frank McDonald Jacobs, the progressive man, right? That is probably the one that agitated enough to have Peter DeLille fired. So his plan works out. The Thunderwater group successfully infiltrate the Bank Council system and occupy every seat, pushing out Frank McDonald, who was on the same ballot. He's the last name that doesn't make it onto the council. Mm-hmm. Of course, he can't go quietly. He complains. He says, that guy doesn't even live here. He doesn't even live in Kahnawake. But it turns out it's 1917, it's World War I, and a lot of, you're probably familiar with the Dominion Bridge Company. Dominion Bridge was actually working on munitions at the time in Lachine, and a lot of men were working there. So a lot of Kahnawake men were working there. So this Frank McDonald was trying to say, well, this guy doesn't even live here. But
sometimes they would have they wouldn't even be able to. They would maybe even live there during the week while they were working, because who's going to walk all the way and whatever.
So after an investigation, it was proven that this man was actually from the community. And so anyway, the Thunderwater group makes it into the council, and depending on who you talk to, I'll say I've heard that their platform, aside from getting rid of the Sisters of St. Anne, their platform was to go back to traditional government. So I'm sure already the Indian agent wasn't too happy about this direction. Let me check my notes for a quick second. One thing, somebody wrote about this in the 1960s, and she talks about the 14. You ever hear of the 14 people? It's a recycled story that is connected to a lot of, that's tied to a lot of different episodes. So in this case, it's saying that there was actually a fight. This woman who's writing this paper says that there was an actual fight at the elections between the progressives and the Thunderwater supporters, and that there was only 14 people who opted to vote in the election, and they voted for Frank McDonald, the progressive man, and that after that, anybody who was those 14 or family members with the 14, they got a bad name in town because they did the community wrong. But I don't think it's true. I don't think the 14, because people will say, well, it was only 14 people that allowed the Seaway to come in. There was only 14 people. Like, there's definitely a story connected with the 14.
So they just moved some of the stories. They just moved
and
around.
even Akwesasne has a story of the 14. But what I really think the 14, where that story comes from, is the electricity. When electricity was coming into the community. Because there's an article in the New Yorker in the 1930s where there's the journalist is interviewing men in New York ironworking, and they're having a long discussion about the pros and cons of electricity in Kahnawake, and only in the end they feel that electricity is going to hurt the community in the long run. And but in there it says that 14 people voted in favor to have electricity in the community. So I think that's where the 14 really come from. But this woman who writes this paper in the 60s says when she talks to people in Kahnawake, they assigned the 14 as being the ones who voted for Frank McDonald Jacobs in the 1917
different from the unlucky number 13.
Yeah.
The negative number in Kahnawake was 14.
I've also heard it as being the 13 or the 12. I heard it for in the 1800s as being those are the ones that brought the bank council in. It's probably really the 5. If you remember, there was the five farmers that asked for the Advancement Act. It's probably confused with that. But there's that story is recycled a bunch of times. So the Thunderwater Band Council, I'll call them that because they're all Thunderwater people that got into the Band Council. They're not successful in getting rid of the Sisters of St. Anne, but they are effective in stopping them from having a permanent residence in the community. So they do stop a residence. I think the residence was supposed to be in a building that was next to the church, that they were going to put in a residence for the nuns and priests.
Well, the next to what I recall when I was younger, some were living
where
at
the
least.
clinic it was.
Where the clinic, where the whatever the services.
But I think
today,
as far as the Sisters of St. Anne, I think that they ended up not being allowed to live here, and that's why St. Anne's.
Yeah, they have the Sheen, the College St. Anne.
The convent that was there, I think that's where they ended up setting up
But
shop.
as a young person, I mean, other people could, come up with that information. I remember some of them. Now it might have been before, but maybe they weren't allowed. But then, 30 years later, things change.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I recall also where the fire hall is.
Yeah.
That was also my understanding was
Oh,
that
yeah.
was a convent,
Oh, I didn't
like
know that.
a residence.
Yeah.
But I was confused. Maybe I got it wrong. But there was the one that's, like you said, right in front of Cattery School.
Yeah.
And then this
Even
one,
had a cross on it. Remember,
Yeah.
it had a cross the building.
for a while, it was part of the like that clinic.
Mm-hmm.
It was a medical clinic.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Was the clinic.
But there was another building that I'm someone a little older than me, might clear that up at some point. Maybe I'll look into that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we're an hour and a half into it. Maybe we'll target 2 hours.
Just, let's go for
Yeah, I mean, you could always
it. Yeah.
I'll see how far we get in 30 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, that's fun. Let's keep going. Well, you want to take a break?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Need some water?
Yeah, maybe a little. I'm not talking
is
that
coffee.
much. He needs
I got my
water.
coffee.
I'm good. I don't need any.
Okay.
1918, Chief Thunderwater arranges for the installation of 24 traditional chiefs at Akwesasne. What's significant is even this is kind of brokered by Chief Thunderwater, but somehow he convinces the Confederacy Council at Grand River to condole chiefs at Akwesasne. I have a lot of questions about that because I only have one source. It specifically talks about a condolence ceremony that's taking place. So it's not like they took that out of the air. But Gahnawaga is there. Peter DeLille is there as one of the main Thunderwater guys. And it might even identify him as a chief, Peter DeLille.
Yeah.
24 chiefs is a strange number.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fit in the Kanien'kehá:ka National Council system.
Math doesn't work.
And it doesn't fit in the 7 clan system. Akwesasne, they might have had 6. I can't remember, but it was very similar to the way our traditional council was structured. So 24 is a strange number. Could be a mistake. It could be a combination of chiefs from Gahnawaga and Akwesasne, since Gahnawaga is there. I think Ganasadaga is even there. So it could be a combined group of chiefs that are installed. It's clear that this is all taking place on the Canadian side. So if you recall, there in 1890 there was chiefs, Confederacy chiefs that were put up in Akwesasne on the U.S. side. And again, I hate using the terminology because it's not ours.
You're right.
But geographically, that's the way it was laid out. So it's a bit of a mystery, these 24 chiefs, but they are condoled by the Confederacy Council at Grand River. Chief Thunderwater kind of disappears. Not long after that, I'd say by 1920, he disappears. And he never comes back again. Whether he's banned from here or not, he does spend some time at Grand River. There's a Thunderwater movement and in Grand River. And, I mean, he orchestrated Grand River to come to Akwesasne to install chiefs. So he had to have a relationship with them. And I have come across, from Jerry Reed, an identification card that was issued by Chief Descahe.
Was it? Yeah.
Author saying that Thunderwater was a part of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
So he was spending time in I guess with the Confederacy at Grand River. Just a quick acknowledgement to Jerry Reed. You know Jerry?
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever met Jerry.
No.
Yeah.
Jerry's been pretty instrumental in a lot of my research, and I can't thank him enough for him sending me information. For the past maybe almost 20 years, we've been corresponding together, and a lot of the documents that I have in my collection come from him. So
He has an
nice
almost
acknowledgement.
over a 40-year relationship with the community.
And he was at survival school.
Yeah, that's what I refer. He was, he was involved in writing resources.
Yeah.
and doing research.
So, I'm gonna jump to the 20s now. Things kind of get good around here. You know, when I started the title, the fall and rebirth.
Yeah.
I think we're getting to the rebirth part now.
Yeah.
So we're getting to good stuff. 1920s there's a real strong political mobilization with the Confederacy, and what I see happening in the early 20s especially is the remnants of Kahnawake traditional council being absorbed by the Longhouse movement. And when I go through the timeline, you'll see what I mean, because it starts with whoever's left on this traditional council, and they start making inroads with the Confederacy. And yeah, so we'll get right into it. So in February of 1922, it's declared that the remnants of Kahnawage's traditional council are going to attend a meeting at Grand River, at the Six Nations Council at Grand River, to talk about the injustices of the Indian Act and probably the elected system in general. So the men who are identified as chiefs on this council is Gahtaradiru Bova, who's probably becoming an older man by this point because he was installed in 1898 as one of the traditional chiefs. His son, Wisse Ariwaganra. His English name is Mike Bova, and another chief named American Horse. American Horse is widely known. He was an entertainer. His English name was Angus Montour. And those were the three chiefs that were left on Kahnawage's traditional council. And they declare that they're going to be attending this council at Grand River in April. It's not mentioned, but we see later Peter DeLille is kind of connected to these people. So there's that Thunderwater connection. Sometimes he works as the interpreter for the traditional chiefs. Not long after they make this declaration, Gahtaradiru even goes to the media boasting about it, that we're going to the Six Nations. We're going to the Six Nations to look at the treaties and our rights and all these things. He's boasting about that this is going to happen. So that meeting that they're preparing for takes place in April of 1922. And a delegation from Kahnawake, Akwesasne, and Ganasdage go to Grand River, and they participate in a council meeting there. And in essence, what they do is they rekindle a council fire relationship between the Confederacy Council at Grand River and Kahnawake, and by extension, Akwesasne and Ganasdage. I'll read you a bit of the declaration because it sounds pretty cool. We, the Six Nations chiefs, have heard the wish of our brothers. We are glad to note you still remember the words of the old wampum belt, a covenant which means peace and friendship forever. Brother, at your request, when convenient, we will make your council fire anew in the language of old. We now build a council fire anew and give full vigor and dust to our covenant, so that its smoke may pierce the sky. The way I'm interpreting that is that by renewing the council fire, that they kindle the fire here for the traditional chiefs. But it's making a bit of a transition from that 7-clan council that we kind of inherited from the 1800s, and by getting absorbed into the and don't forget, in terms of context, Grand River is 2 years away from the big
1924 when Canada went into the
by force of arms,
right
by force of arms, took over the council house and deposed the traditional council. So they're going through the same thing. Grand River is probably thinking, let's get everybody on board to fight the Indian Act. So Grand River kindles a fire.
They knew
here.
it was coming, or they probably knew there was whatever was going on there too. Yeah.
Yeah. So this declaration is made for Kahnawake, that Kahnawake has taken up the old system and absorbing the remnants of the old traditional council into the Confederacy.
Yeah.
That's significant because a lot of people who believe that the Seven Nations was never a part of the Confederacy, well, for Kahnawake by this point, even if you do believe that, it's now absorbed
into the remnants of.
Yeah.
So there's a certain acknowledgement there that you had.
Yeah.
Well, maybe change had occurred. Now we're reconnecting.
Later that year, in December, I can't tell you if this was a community meeting or a petition, but 2,147 of Kahnawage's population of 2,500 condemned the Indian Act and declare their preference to have a council of Mohawk chiefs. And they send it to Charles Stewart, who's the Minister of the Interior and Indian Affairs. And they send a pretty bold letter talking about, that they're going to be the government of the community.
Yeah.
What's significant is this is the first time we see the signatures of chiefs using league titles. So it's signed by Chief Dekarihoka, Chief Sarahowane, and Chief Hiawatha. League titles. This is the first time where league titles applied to the remnants of Kahnawage's traditional council after their meeting with Grand River in 1922. Very possible. Because they just didn't dream this.
Right.
They just didn't take this out of the air.
Sure.
They clearly used the names, the terms, the title.
And it even says at the end, the undersigned are the principal chiefs chosen by the women of different clans and are men who have never voted in the election system.
There you go.
So that's their declaration. And they claim that they have 2,100 people in the community that signed off on this position, that endorsed this position. I've never seen the document. I've only seen reports of it. So I don't know if the petition actually has names, or maybe it was a community that many people endorsed it. I don't know. But that was in December of 1924. But
24.
Sorry, 1922. 1922.
Yeah.
And it's even reported in Maclean's magazine.
Oh yeah.
That this referendum took place.
1923
is a bigger year than 1922. So Duncan Campbell Scott, of course, is not happy about this and makes a statement condemning this traditional council, dismissing them as agitators and troublemakers and what have you, and says that we think that it's in your best interest to not revert to the old system and keep on going with this elected system. Well, the new traditional, I don't want to say new traditional council, the traditional council of Kahnawake, in newspaper article, put out a statement in the newspapers. What's kind of cool is that they say that they are inspired by the Irish Republic.
Oh yeah.
And in I think 1916 was the Easter Rising in Ireland when the Irish Republic declared itself the government separate from Britain. Yeah. And it started a war, and they ended up getting their autonomy to a certain degree anyway. But the traditional chiefs say that they want home rule, which was a phrase that the Irish used.
Home rule.
Yeah, and they said that they were inspired by that movement.
That's pretty cool.
And there's a pretty cool quote in here where it says, "Of course, Duncan Campbell Scott, the deputy of the Indian Department, would lose his job and a good cigar if his answer was otherwise than the usual kind he gave."
There you go.
And
cigar.
they talk about the Skahe, they talk about the imperial government, and that they don't care what Duncan Campbell says. They're establishing a traditional council.
When had the Skahe gone? Was it after?
It's the same year.
The same year.
1923.
I think he went to Geneva.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
23.
Yeah.
So it's a very eventful couple of years there. And that one is signed by Sardahoane Gontherdadirdu. And this is probably the first time that we see Dominic Tuax signing off as a chief. I believe that in the previous position when it said Chief de Gardihoga, I think it's Dominic
But
Tuax.
this time they wrote just the English name.
And this time they wrote their English names. Dominic Tuax becomes now one of the main focal figures, the main figures of the traditionalist movement in Kahnawake at this time. We see that in February of 1923, he marries a woman from Akwesasne. I believe he ends up living there for a little while, but I'll get to that. But after these high profile statements are being circulated in newspapers, it's clear that Canada is after these guys.
Yeah.
They're after them now because they start picking them off one by one, arresting them for stupid crimes. So Gontherdadirdu, the old chief that was installed in 1898, he's arrested for and charged for not sending his children to a white school. He sounds like he's working somewhere near Mirabel, and it's
probably doing logging and stuff
something like that.
Yeah.
He's out there, but he ends up getting charged for not sending his kids to a white school. So they're going after, like I said, they're going after these guys. There's a brief leadership dispute between Dominic Tuax and a man named Garhayandu. I did some research to try to figure out who this man was. Garhayandu. And the only name that I could find in any records is a priest who would have lived around the same time. His English name is Michael Jacobs. He was ordained as a priest in 1935. It's possible it's the same man, but he does say that he was elected. I was elected. He can't be de Gardihoga because I'm the one that won the popular vote. And Dominic comes back and says, "You don't even know how our system works. It's the clan mothers that make these decisions." And the clan mother came to me and asked me. Actually, what he says is Gontherdadirdu encouraged him to take it. He says he came to my house because he was living on Cornwall Island with his new wife.
Yeah.
And he asked him, come back, we need you.
Well, Michael Jacobs ended up as a priest, being most of his career in Akwesasne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
He was the priest that was there in St. Regis, as they say.
Yeah. So anyway, Dominic ends up on top of that conflict, and he continues on identifying himself as the Gardihoga from that point on. There's a Six Nations gathering that takes place in Kahnawake in May, and Dominic presides over this gathering. There's a lot of different reports of what took place at this gathering, where it took place. I believe it took place at the property of Gontherdadirdu, which is in this area, like I said, because there's photos of that gathering and there's photos of the gathering that took place at the original Thunderwater movement, and it looks like it's the same place. And the newspaper articles will say it took place at the property of Gontherdadirdu, which was just east of the village area. So I think it even says like a mile outside the village in the east.
Well, that might be because the village,
Mm-hmm.
It could be. Again, this area obviously changed because of the seaway too.
Yeah.
To a degree, yeah.
Well, that
So-
was later, right?
No, but I'm saying
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
what it looked like and what you saw,
Right.
the Seaway later
Oh, yeah, yeah.
makes it look a lot, was different. I mean, I don't know exactly.
So it says that 100 people probably showed up from the United States, which is indicating to me that they're making inroads now with the Confederacy communities on the New York side. And one of the men who are in attendance is a man named George Thomas from Onondaga. George Thomas at that time was the acting Adodarho
Okay.
at Onondaga. And according to one report, he came here and he woke up the Indians here to going back to the old ways. Probably more on a spiritual side than a political side, because it seemed like the people always were advocating for traditional government here. Mm-hmm. But I take that as meaning to go back to the Longhouse. So Dominic and Gahtardadirdu attend the Grand Council at Onondaga later that month, and Dominic brings up a bunch of issues concerning police stations, hospitals, imposition of schools, interference in Kahnawaga's affairs. He brings up a bunch of local issues at Grand Council.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, again, that they're making inroads. There's a fundraiser that takes place to attend the next Grand Council, again, at the property of Gahtardadirdu. And it sounds like what's happening on the New York side has to do with the Everett report. Ever hear of the Everett report?
No.
No, I haven't.
The Everett report comes from a New York State Assemblyman named Everett. Can't remember his first name. And he does an investigation of what lands the Six Nations legitimately own. And in his report, which we have here at the Cultural Center, if anybody wants to read it, in his report, he says that the Six Nations legitimately have title to about 6 million acres of land. Sometimes I see newspapers fudge that number to like 16 million acres, or there's variations of it, but I think that the actual report says 6 million. So for a good part of the 1920s, there's a big mobilization on the New York side to try to get that land back. And so there's a woman from Oneida, Wisconsin. Her last name is Kellogg, and she's kind of wealthy. I think she's married to a non-native, but she's good friends with this Everett, and she becomes an advocate for getting land or compensation back. And so it sounds like the council that Gahtardadirdu and Dominic are going to be going to on Onondaga has to do with this Everett report. It becomes a big thing. In fact, Dominic gets like really involved in this Everett report. But that's what they want to raise money for, and because they want to be able to go to this Grand Council that's taking place in Onondaga. Get a little bit sidetracked though, a little later, because I guess they want to take advantage of George Thomas hanging around the community. And there's a wampum belt that's at the church. And I guess they thought, well, maybe this man would know something about this wampum belt. So they go into the church. They go to the church and they talk to the priest, and they say, there's a man that we have from a different community. Can we take the wampum so he could analyze it and maybe distinguish what it means? And it turns out it's the 1677 Huron belt. When they moved to Lorette, the Hurons, when they left here, they gave us a belt commemorating that we're still friends.
That we're still friends, and we're moving, but we're still friends.
Exactly. So the priest is cooperative and says, sure, take it and have it reviewed. Well, when the Indian agent says, what'd you give them that for? So he calls the police and they arrest, they charge 3 of the chiefs. Gahtardadirdu, American Horse, and a man named Angus Deer. Angus Deer flees the country. Probably goes to the States somewhere. Maybe he's already working there. We don't know.
Yeah.
But he gets out of Dodge. But the other two men, Gunther de Dierno has to be in his late 80s, by the way. An American horse,
yeah,
too.
because he was back in 1895 or 1898.
Yeah.
He was.
And
And they still went after him.
and he does serve a little bit of time in jail. He
He's an
serves
old man,
the two men serve, I think, 2 months in jail, in a cold jail. And but they're systematic. Oh, and then around the same time, Dominic Tuax gets arrested. He gets arrested for vagrancy. You know what vagrancy is?
Vagrancy?
Just
Like not
walking
living
or
here, that
hanging.
you're not from here.
You got arrested for not
just
living
hanging out.
And
And then just,
but I
where
had
are
to
you in the
think about
corner of
this.
my store?
I had to think about this.
Hang-
Why?
Why?
Why would they charge him with vagrancy? And it occurred to me, he had just at the beginning of the year had married a woman from Upazusne, and it sounds like he's been living with her and going back and forth between the two communities, like a lot of our people do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so he gets charged with vagrancy for you know,
For
Like,
just,
just
being a
hang-
bum.
you
Being
don't
a
being a
bum.
bum. You don't have a place to stay. Where do you live? Oh, I don't know. Maybe you're a vagrant because they prevent people from being a bum hanging around.
But since
That's it.
But
That's
since January of 1923,
Yeah.
1923, when they put out that statement reaffirming their relationship to the Confederacy
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
they're going to have a traditional council under the Confederacy, after all this, they arrest Gunther de Dierno for not sending his children to a white school. They arrest him again and American Horse for stealing a wampum belt. They arrest Dominic for vagrancy. You know who the justice of the peace is in these cases? Frank McDonald Jacobs, and he's in the proceedings along with Brosseau, the Indian agent, and the head of police.
I would hope for these guys,
so it's so
Obvious.
obvious.
They're going after
They're going
these
after
guys.
them.
Yeah.
They're totally going after these guys.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So
Bunch of-
I'm thinking we're at 2 hours.
Yeah. What do
Maybe
you wanna-
we'll shut it down, and I could continue later because there's still
It's still
quite
a
a
fair
few
amount.
years.
Well,
to
what
go.
year are we on right now?
We're going into
We're going into
1924.
now. We're getting into the
Yeah, 1924. This is when things heat up with that Everett report.
Yeah.
Um,
And then there's all the other stuff to do with the border and
Paul
Daibo
yeah,
and
Paul K. Daibo,
some
and
of
then
the
the
connections
establishment
there.
of the Longhouse
Yeah,
follows, like
yeah.
in the 1927.
Yeah.
So
we
maybe
can
we could
do
continue.
a separate one
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well,
Yeah. So
Okay.
maybe
Well, I guess-
that'll be it for today.
I guess
Yeah.
But it was really there was there was. I commend you for your extensive knowledge in these things. You know, you got.
well, I enjoyed it. So
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Definitely.
I know I was
Yeah,
silent
I knew
for most
some.
of it, but
I
it's
knew,
'cause
I'd
I'm trying
heard
to-
of some of it, but the detail
Yeah.
and the more recent.
And then the dates too are
Yeah,
important.
and then you put it in think. And me as you're going, I'm going like, what's going on? Also, I always do that.
Yeah.
I'm that I've mentioned it a number
Yeah.
of times that I'm going, what's happening? Why are people? How is it moving so quick? What's holding it back?
Yeah.
Or what's going on and putting stresses
Yeah.
I think-
also on just everyday life.
But a
things
big
like that.
for me, a big factor is thinking about like in this world when we're thinking of these things, we're so it's a totally different world now, right?
Yeah.
Like we have look at what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is like
Just with a
imagine
podcast,
at a
yeah.
time when if they
Yeah.
were living at a time when they can all go and talk about these things that
Yeah.
was not available. You know?
There's so much, so many. Yeah.
I think what really occurs to me in this whole there's two things that I'd probably really like to emphasize. One is that we've never been without traditional government.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
We've never been without it. We've had it challenged, but we've never been without. The second part of it is that, and I have to emphasize this, that whatever traditional regime that we had in the 1800s going into the 1900s was absorbed by the Longhouse movement and the Confederacy. So people might make the argument, well, they were Seven Nations chiefs or whatever. Even if you subscribe to that belief, it doesn't matter because it was absorbed. And the same thing happens in Akwesasne in the 40s, where they have a referendum between people who support the Confederacy, people who support the old life chief system, and people who support the elected council. And they overwhelmingly supported the Confederacy system, which at that point, the remaining life chiefs in Akwesasne, who were part of this 6-clan council, a little bit different than ours, they get absorbed. They say, all right, well, we agree to be absorbed by the Longhouse. So they have a very similar story. So those are the two things that I really like to get across, is that we've never been without traditional government, and that it was absorbed by the Longhouse movement.
And one of the things that sort of we've never been without traditional government. Maybe we weren't using the terminologies that were you mentioned something earlier about the first time I said constitution, but that was also in other communities it might not have been talked about either. They wouldn't have used constitution. 150 years ago in wherever they may not have used that term, but then Seth Newhouse comes along and codifies it, as you say, puts it there. And again, now that becomes something that people look at. The term before, it was just the old ways, the old life chiefs, this is how we've done it. As far as our best memory can be. And with all of the changes and us coming here and other people being here, meaning like other being here, this is our memory. And maybe we're not using that, but it's still been what people have had the most felt that that's how we have to do it, and that's how we've always done it. Anyway, it's very interesting.
No, it is.
It's very interesting.
I know there's a lot of.
I'm looking forward to the next one because there's a lot. There's a lot going on right now.
No, right. Set the stage, right? Well, they look at well. Then I don't want to. I can keep on going, but if you go and look at this stuff and then you to leave it on, like you think about where we at today, where we're going, what's the next step, because it all adds to the story of who we are.
It's easy to have a clear opinion in hindsight, you know, but if you put yourself in the shoes of people who were in the 1890s, 1880s,
that's what I mean.
You know, what were they really thinking?
Right. Yeah.
But it's easy to say, like, why did you play so nice?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
right.
All people use the same thing with. I always use the Seaway. Why didn't they do something? Why didn't they take out all their, stand there and point the weapons at them and say, you're not coming here, you know? When the first trucks came
Easier
by,
said
why
than
did
done.
you? We weren't.
But that's
like hindsight, and we don't know all of the dynamics.
Well, that's why this kind of telling, this telling of the history and more like a detail is, I think, really important, because for that reason, makes you look and be like, okay, well, if I was really in the shoes of those guys who were all being chased after, by, like, how the heck did they feel? You know what I mean? Like, what were they going through? And I don't know. That's what I think of. And at different times, a lot less luxuries too back then. Now we live much different lives and lights on, lights off kind of world. You know what I mean? Back then it was just you were living for your people or in the day to day. You just were. That's what I like to. But I guess we could leave it. We'll leave it there, and then we'll have another one. Hopefully sooner rather than later, and
keep the momentum going from
this one. I think it was really good. So any last?
We just got to remember 1924.
That was when we lost.
Okay.
1924, 100 years ago.
100 years ago.
Well, all right. Well, anything last words, or we're all nothing to say?
No, I have nothing. I'm just looking forward to the next
all right.
Iteration.
All right. No. And
no, guys.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was good.
Yeah,
I know. I was like, there was a lot there that I was like, it was happening. I was grasping different things, but you helped. Understand.
I did not.
Thank you for that.
That whole gap. Well, I mean, there's still more, but I known to me, I had always been under this. Well, the real connection with the Confederacy was when Paul K. Dibo, when that really began to be, I'm going to use the term reinvigorated, if you would, or the connections were, whether it be physical or also like political, whatever terms you want to use. I didn't realize that 4, 5, or 6 years before were so significant to this community. I know there were things in other places, but you've brought that and enlightened me on that.
Well, even that, like, if I remember right, I'll have to check this, but Paul K. Dibo's mother was Dominic's grandmother.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I think that's
like
that's why he latches on to the Confederacy
for sure.
and the Longhouse for
His
the
mother.
Traditional Council for support because his mother's a clan mother.
Well, the other thing is everybody uses him, but he was and partially that could have been part of the reason that, but there were a number of, he wasn't the only one that was charged. He was we're going to pick him.
Yeah.
And what were some of the reasons that they picked him?
That's for next.
There is something cool though, where it says when he wins in 1927, when Paul K. Dibo wins in 1927, the following year they have a big celebration, a victory celebration at the Longhouse. Yeah. And the newspapers say they're gonna have a dance. Everybody's gonna have fun.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
And Gunther the Dero shows up. He's 91 years old.
Yeah.
And he's decked out in his regalia and he's ready to dance.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
But, I mean, 91. That guy, think about everything that guy saw. And this Dominic, too, like, these two guys, they had such eventful lives in that little period.
That's what I was really, too, was grasped by. I was like, they meant, like, they were really
doing
just...
the math in my head about when you said he shows up in 1928
eventful lives, for sure.
Yeah.
And it was 91, so his...
In a lot of ways, they're putting their lives out on the line,
like 38 or something.
1838.
1838. So when he got in there, he was already 60 years old at first.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there,
crazy,
you had...
I imagine being treated... Imagine well, how old are you?
70.
Imagine they're going after you. You're 70 years old, and you're just like...
He's in his 80s. They put him in jail.
That's what I mean. Like, you're just living your life.
But
they're going
after... put Trump in jail.
Oh, you should have said that on... we should have got that one. Oh, you still recording? Got it. That was
crazy.
Yeah, that was good. I appreciate it.